Content warning. The Matherson Marriage contains unhealthy relationship dynamics and fictional domestic abuse. If you are in a real-life Matherson marriage, please reach out to the appropriate authorities for help. Resources you may find helpful include the Pixel Project's Domestic Violence Resource page and UN Women's International Helplines list. Resources will be linked in the video description for accessibility. Content warning for Chapter 20. This chapter contains domestic abuse, alcoholism, unhealthy relationship dynamics, and violence. Please take caution and listen at your own risk. Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I will be reading from The Matherson Marriage by Ruby M. Ayres. Chapter 20. Buster was ill for days. The actual injury to his head, where he had fallen, was nothing, but the shock and exposure seemed to have taken hold of his sturdy constitution, and for the time being to have completely prostrated him. Pansy nursed him night and day. Heaven alone knows what it'll be like when he's well, Matherson grumbled. He was spoiled enough before. You know, there's something queer about Basil, Violet confided to Joyce one afternoon. I don't like to say it. I wouldn't dare let Pansy hear me, but I believe he drinks too much. Joyce kept her eyes lowered. I think most men do, she said bluntly. Violet laughed. Oh, you're a man-hater, she answered, but I'm quite serious. I wonder if Pansy has noticed it. Probably, if it's true. Violet shook her head. I don't think Pansy is very observant where Basil is concerned, she said with sudden illumination. And there's something else I've discovered, too, in the last few days, Joyce. You're quite an explorer, Joyce said cynically, and waited with bated breath for the mention of Lynn Ramsden's name. But Violet only said, Basil's frightfully jealous of Pansy. Jealous? Yes, Violet was sitting on the windowsill, twisting the tassel of the blind cord, and her eyes were serious. Yes, jealous, she said again. Do you remember when Lynn brought Buster in that morning? How long ago is it? A week? 9 days, I think, to be exact. Well, you remember Pansy kissed him, and nobody could wonder. I should have hugged him if Buster had belonged to me. I just happened to look at Basil, and if ever there was furious jealousy in any man's eyes, I saw it in his. Joyce went on darning a stocking. I shouldn't have thought Mr. Matherson that sort of man, she said. Nor should I, Violet agreed, especially of Lynn. He and Pansy are such old friends, but I know I'm right. He could have killed Lynn for that kiss. It wasn't anything to do with Mr. Ramsden, was it? Joyce asked. No, I suppose not. Poor Lynn. He went quite white, didn't he? Men hate any demonstration, don't they? There was a little silence. Then she added slowly, He's never been here since, at any rate, has he? He naturally wouldn't, as Buster's been so ill, Violet considered. He could have come to inquire, she said at last. Of course. I've met him once or twice, and I've told him how Buster was, and all that sort of thing. Still, I think he might have called. Joyce rethreaded her needle. I dare say he's very busy. Isn't he leaving Chiswell soon? Yes, next week. Violet looked at Joyce defiantly. And I'm sorry, if nobody else is, she said. I'm sorry, too, Joyce answered. I like Mr. Ramsden ever so much. I think he's a dear. Violet's eyes filled with tears. Life had been a dreary affair for her lately. She had fallen in love with Lynn, as an impetuous girl will fall in love with the first good-looking man she happened to meet, and her warm heart was sad and perplexed to account for his sudden change. I thought he liked me, she told herself. I'm sure he did. We were such pals. That she was honest, and she knew that Lynn had never shown her anything more than friendship, and that it was only she who had hoped to turn that friendship into something deeper. And now he was going away, and Green Gables had lost its attraction for her. She spoke impulsively. I didn't mean to tell anyone, Joyce, except Pansy, and she knows. But I can't keep it to myself any longer. An unshared secret is so dull. Guess what I'm doing? Joyce raised her steady eyes. Doing? What do you mean? Violet laughed. I'm looking for a job. I can't go on living here forever with Pansy, much as I love her. Basil's sick of me. I can see it in his eyes. And if I stayed here much longer, I believe I should get to hate him. She sighed. It only shows that you never know a man till you live in the same house with him. I used to be so sorry for Basil. I thought Pansy wasn't nearly as nice and considerate to him as she might have been. And now I wonder how on earth she puts up with him at all, and how on earth she could have brought herself to marry him. Joyce said nothing, and she went on reflectively. Lynn wanted to marry Pansy, you know. Did he? She stroked the bridge of her pretty nose thoughtfully. He made himself wretched about her years ago, but he's got over it, of course. Oh, of course, Joyce said. Violet turned. Why that sarcastic tone of voice? She asked. I didn't know it was sarcastic. Violet got down from the windowsill. I think the most awful part of getting married is that you can't get unmarried if you find you've made a mistake, she said. Joyce laughed. A great many people seem to get unmarried, as you call it, all the same, she answered. There's no need to make a mistake. I don't know. It's just, I think I shan't be in a hurry myself. I'm going to see something of the world first. That's why I'm trying to get a post in London. Joyce looked interested. Have you heard of anything? She asked. Yes, 2 things, and don't tell Pansy, will you? I'm going up to London tomorrow to see about one of them. Are you? What sort of a post? It's in an office, a sort of secretary's job to a lawyer. I haven't seen him, but he sounds nice, and his name is Donaldson. Of course, I may not get it, I know. I don't see why not. Well, I shall know tomorrow, and you won't tell anyone, will you, Joyce? No. Violet sauntered to the door. I'll go and dig Pansy out. She's hardly left Buster's room since he's been ill. She ought to go out. She looks so ill, Joyce agreed. I know. Violet was frowning. I can't think why that fool Basil doesn't look after her better, she broke out impatiently. She went along to the nursery and found Buster asleep, with Pansy sitting beside him. She bent over the bed. He looks much better, she whispered. He'll soon be quite well. Pansy looked down at Buster's sleeping face. Yes, bless him, she said softly. Violet drew up a chair. I'll stay with him for half an hour while you go out, she said firmly. Nonsense. He'll never miss you. And I know what it will be. You'll be ill next. And then what shall we do? I'm perfectly well. You look a wreck, Violet answered with sisterly frankness. I won't leave him, I swear. Not for half a second till you come back. It's a nice afternoon. Go for a walk or get Basil to drive you somewhere. Pansy shrank back. No, I'll just go in the garden. Well, so long as you get some fresh air. Pansy went downstairs and into the garden. Her head ached from want of sleep, and she felt weak, as if she had just recovered from an illness. She felt old, too. She was sure she had aged years since the night Buster was lost. During those agonized hours of suspense, something seemed to have been taken from her, which she knew she could never regain, leaving in its place a feeling of fear, blind fear of the future. She had grown afraid of Basil. To her overstrung imagination, he seemed always to be watching her, and she avoided him whenever it was possible. She had not intended to go farther than the garden. She was never happy far away from Buster, for the air was warm, and the sun so bright that she opened the gate and walked down the road. She had not seen Lynn since the night he found Buster, and, though she tried not to think of him, he was always there in her heart and mind, a figure she could not banish. He had said that he loved her, but yet he had left her, gone out of her life with brutal suddenness. Why had he done it? Why? She had thought of every possible and impossible explanation, but now she had given up trying. It was too much effort, and she was so weary. She had lost much, but Buster had been spared to her, and she tried to be grateful. Sometimes she thought she could even forgive Lynn for the way he had hurt her, because it was he who had put Buster in her arms again. But she hoped they need never meet any more. The pain in her heart was beginning to numb, and she shrank from the thought of having it roused to life once more. As soon as Buster is well, I'll take him away for a long time, she thought, and when I come back, Lynn won't be here. It was only 2 months since he had come back into her life, but she could no longer imagine life without him. I will never leave you, never, unless you tell me it is your wish that I should. Lynn Ramsden's passionate words came back to her, and with them the old torturing questions. Why was it? She would have given her soul to know. She took the little turning home, past the woods, and went up Hazel Lane. It was here she had had her glimpse of paradise, here that for a little while unhappiness and bitterness had been forgotten. She stood leaning against the gate where she had cried that night, and Lynn had taken her in his arms, and in an aching imagination she relived those moments. The feel of the rough tweed of his coat beneath her cheek, the close pressure of his arms, the touch of his lips on hers, gone, all gone. And I may live to be quite old, perhaps 60, Pansy thought wildly, as she hurried back to the house. What shall I do all my life? I wonder if I shall always mind as much as I do now. Joyce met her in the hall. Mr. Matherson has just come in, she said. She laid a restraining hand on Pansy's arm. I don't think I should go to him, she added diffidently. He seems very quarrelsome, dear. She turned her face away. Pansy, I'm afraid he's had too much to drink. Is he in the library? Pansy whispered. Yes. Pansy turned to tiptoe past the door, but Matherson had been listening for her, and he came out. His face was red and puffy. There was a curiously glazed look in his eyes. His speech was slurred, too, and his voice loud when he spoke. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "Only in the garden, Basil." "Well, come here. I want you." Pansy obeyed shrinkingly. "What do you want?" "I'm just going up to Buster." "Buster can wait," Matherson asserted, and then, in the foolish tone of a man who imagines himself to be masterful, he added violently, "Buster be damned!" He shut the door with an unnecessary slam. "Where have you been?" he asked again. Pansy's eyes dilated. "I told you. In the garden." He stared at her stupidly for a moment. Then he held out his hand. "Come here." Pansy did not move. "What do you want?" she asked. "Come here," he repeated, and then, as she did not obey, he caught her roughly by the wrist. "You're a nice, dutiful wife, you are," he said thickly, "but I've had enough of it, I can tell you. I'm going to change all this." "What do you mean?" she asked fearfully. "What'd I say?" His hot hand still gripped hers. "You asked me once to start all over again. Well, I've made up my mind that we will. No more going away without me. No more excuses that you can't leave Buster when I want you. Basil, let me go." She struggled to free herself, and he laughed. "You want to go? Well, kiss me then, and I'll see." He bent towards her, and she felt his hot breath on her face, as for one desperate moment she closed her eyes and thought of Lynn. He might love her no more, but his kisses were still in her heart. She looked up at her husband. "I'd rather die," she said, and in spite of the muddled state of his brain, Matherson knew it was hatred that looked at him from her eyes. The blood rushed to his head in a furious wave, letting loose his smoldering jealousy. For the moment he lost all self-control, and, beside himself with jealousy and rage, lifted his hand and struck her across the face. Pansy screamed, more with fear than the pain of the blow. She ran to the door, but Matherson caught her before she opened it and swung her roughly back into the room. "You'll stay here if I tell you to. Do you hear? I'm your master whether you like it or not. Let me go. Let me go." She was terrified. It was appalling to think that the man who had once been her adoring lover should have changed so utterly that he could lift his hand against her. She broke into panic-stricken sobbing. "Let me go! You hurt me! Let me go!" Joyce, going slowly upstairs, heard the cry and stopped dead, petrified with amazement. Then she rushed on and into Buster's room. Violet was half asleep, and she looked up with drowsy eyes from the armchair. Then she started up, wide awake. "Goodness, what's the matter?" "It's Pansy, in the library. Mr. Matherson's hurting her." "Hurting her?" Violet was out of the room and down the stairs in a flash. She burst into the library, wide-faced and with furious eyes. "You brute! You great brute!" She flung herself at Matherson. "Let her go! How dare you! Oh, I could kill you!" In the unexpectedness of the attack, Matherson released Pansy so violently that she fell back giddily against the table. He tried to laugh as he met Violet's furious eyes. "You mind your own business, young lady," he spluttered, "if you want to stay in my house." Violet flushed crimson. "It is my business, and I don't want to stay in your beastly house," she flared out. She put her arms around her sister. "Never mind, darling. I'll kill him if he touches you again. Come upstairs with me." She looked at Matherson. "And if you dare come near us," she threatened, "I'll fetch all the servants and tell them what a brute you are." He took a step forward. "You dare speak to me like this in my own house," he blustered. Violet turned her back on him. "Pooh! You've had too much to drink," she said contemptuously. She took Pansy up to her room and locked the door. She made her lie down on the bed. She kissed her and cried over her, and petted her as if she had been a child. "Never mind. He'll never dare do it again," she said. "I'll have him summoned if he does." She laughed hysterically. "Oh, Pansy, you'd have been far happier after all if you'd married Lynn, poor as he was." Pansy gave a shuddering sob and buried her face more deeply in the pillow. "It only shows," Violet went on, "that money doesn't really count. What's the good of having everything solid silver in the house if you've got to live with a brute like that?" Pansy roused herself with an effort. There was an ugly red wheal on her face where Basil had struck her. "He's never done it before," she tried to defend him. "He'll be sorry tomorrow. He's never done such a thing before. It's just that he's had too much to drink." "And not the first time either," Violet answered. "That's the secret of it all, in my opinion. That's why he's always so disagreeable. Oh, Pansy, I could have killed him." She began pacing the room agitatedly. Pansy lay still, one arm across her eye, as she felt as if she had reached the end of her endurance, as if nothing mattered. Violet came back. She sat down on the bed. "If only I was a man," she said fiercely. Pansy got her breath. "He'll never do it again. I'm sure he won't. Try and forget it, and you'll never tell anyone, will you?" "I'm not so proud of it as all that," Violet said fiercely. She bent and kissed Pansy's hair. "You stay here, and I'll bring up some tea. Buster's all right. He's fast asleep, and Joyce is with him. I'll have my tea with you." She looked back as she reached the door, and something infinitely pathetic in Pansy's huddled figure struck her to the heart. She came back quickly. "If there's anything in the world I can do for you," she said passionately, "if there's anything you want—" "No, dear, thank you." But when Violet had gone, Pansy hid her face in the pillows again and sobbed broken-heartedly. Anything she wanted. "Lynn, Lynn, I want Lynn!" The voiceless cry went up from her heart for the man who no longer cared how unhappy she was. Violet came back with a tea tray, and they made a poor pretense of eating. But after a few moments, Violet broke out again. "It just made my blood boil! Pansy, I must go out for a little while, or I shall explode, or murder somebody! Will you be all right if I leave you?" "Of course." "Lock your door, then." But she need not have feared, for as she passed the library on her way out, she saw Matherson stretched full length on the sofa, snoring loudly. She took a hat from the hall stand and went quickly through the garden and along the road. She felt as if she must walk off her rage and indignation. Lynn would have killed him if he had been there, she thought, and I would have helped him. Then she sat down on the grassy bank by the wayside and cried, tears of pain for her sister, tears of rage against Matherson. They had all been so proud of this marriage. Fools and idiots we were, she thought with bitter scorn, as if all the money in the world can buy happiness. Steps sounded on the road, and she started up guiltily. Then she stopped, the color flying to her face, for the man coming towards her was Lynn Ramsden. He was wearing breeches and gaiters, and an old Norfolk coat, and his boots were white with dust, as if he had walked many miles. He looked tired, though he smiled when he recognized Violet. "Hello!" Then he broke off. "What's the matter?" he asked swiftly. Violet shook her head. "Nothing, at least, nothing you'd care about." "Try me and see," Lynn said. She looked so like Pansy at that moment that his heart failed him. This had been one of his bad days, when only the utmost strength had kept him from breaking his word and going to Green Gables. He had spent the morning and afternoon tramping the country, trying to wear himself into complete exhaustion. Day after day, he had done the same thing during the past fortnight, only returning home to sleep like a log. Violet shook her head, her lips quivering. "You wouldn't care," she said fiercely. Then she broke down. It's Basil. He's such a brute." She was crying out right now. "Oh, I wish I were a man. I'd kill him." Ramsden's face lost color. "Why? What's he done?" he asked. "Has he been thrashing Buster again?" No. She wiped her eyes with an angry hand. "I suppose I ought not to tell you. Pansy would be furious if she knew, but I must tell someone or die. Basil came home drunk this afternoon, and he hit Pansy." Ramsden stopped dead with a curious jerky movement. "Hit Pansy?" "Yes, it was nothing she'd done, poor darling. I don't know why it was, but he hit her, and she screamed and I went down. Oh, Lynn, you were walking fast." He slackened speed. "Sorry, go on, what happened?" "I don't know. I took her upstairs and locked the door, and she cried so. Oh, you don't know how she cried. I've never seen her so upset. You know she never sheds a tear unless something really dreadful has happened. Don't you remember in the old days you used to say you didn't believe she had a heart at all?" She looked up at him for a reply, but his face was averted. "Of course, she says he's never done it before," Violet went on scornfully. "But I wouldn't like to bet on it. Wives always seem to think they must stick up for their husbands, no matter what brutes they are. But I never would. If a man struck me, I'd either kill him or have him locked up." She laughed chokingly, and more tears came. "Since I came to Green Gables, I thought things weren't quite as nice as they might be," she said after a moment. "But I didn't like to say anything. I wish I had known now. I will in future. I'll let Basil see what I think of him." But still Lynn said nothing, and she went on once more. "Of course, he had had too much to drink, I know, and I suppose that's some sort of an excuse, and he's horribly jealous too, I know that, but she's never given him any cause to be jealous, I'm sure. She's much too straight. You can't count that night Buster was lost. When she kissed you, I mean. Anyone would have done the same thing. I know I should, but Basil hated it. He hated it almost as much as you did." "As much as I did?" Lynn repeated her last words mechanically. "Yes." Violet dried her eyes finally this time, and put her handkerchief away. "You went quite white with anger," she told him, "and you needn't have minded. Pansy was only so grateful. She didn't know how else to express herself." Lynn's white face twisted into a smile. Minded? If she had only known. They walked some distance in silence. "I feel heaps better now I've told you," Violet said with a long-drawn sigh. "And you won't tell anyone, will you, Lynn?" "No." She looked up at him. "Are you angry with me?" "No, Violet, no." I'm glad. Pansy and I both thought lately that you're sick of us and wanted to break the friendship. I thought it might be because you'd lost your money, but Pansy said no. She was sure you knew that made no difference to us. I know that. His voice was terribly constrained. I've been so busy, he stammered. I'm leaving Chiswell's in 4 days, you know. I know. Her voice was wistful. Where are you going, Lynn? He shook his head. I haven't any definite plans. I shall go to London first and look round for something. I've got to work again. You've got some people, haven't you? I've got an uncle in town. He laughed. He won't have much time for me, though, when he knows I've lost all my worldly possessions. Was it very much? About 25,000. She drew a long breath. How dreadful! It will teach you a lesson, Lynn. He repeated her words. A lesson? What do you mean? Not to speculate. I don't speculate. Speculation has never been a weakness of mine. She stared at him. Well, then how on earth did you lose it? She asked blankly. Basil said it was bad investments. Gambling investments. Ramsden flushed. There are lots of ways of losing money, he answered evasively. Yes, Violet agreed, but she was not deceived. There's something behind it all. I know there is, she told herself positively. She stopped. I must go back now. I said I wouldn't be out long. I'll come a little way with you. His voice sounded jaded and weary, and Violet said quickly, I shouldn't, Lynn. You look ever so tired. Where have you been today? He shrugged his shoulders. I don't know, just tramping about. Why did you, when you've got a car? He made a grimace. That's up for sale. She flushed with sympathy. Of course. I forgot, I'm sorry. You needn't be, he told her. I like walking. I've been sleeping badly lately, and if I tramp myself dog-tired, things are better. She gave him a searching look. It sounds like a guilty conscience if you can't sleep, she said, half in fun. Perhaps. He went with her as far as the gate of Green Gables, then stopped. Why not come in? Violet urged. I'm sure Pansy would like to see you. His face twitched. I should like to see her, he answered in a hard voice, but no, I don't think I will today. Thanks, goodbye. He raised his hat and was gone. Violet looked after him with wistful eyes. I know there's something behind it, she told herself again with conviction. I wish to goodness I could find out what it is. And that is the end of chapter 20 of The Matherson Marriage by Ruby M. Ayres. Thank you for listening to this chapter with me, and I hope that you have a great day.